Without further ado, let's start. Regenerative fashion has become a new buzzword. The term broadly refers to sourcing fibres from regenerative agriculture. There have been various interpretations around the world. In the UK, regenerative fashion is still in an explorative stage. Today, our panel will discuss the challenges and opportunities in creating a truly regenerative fashion system in the UK. Unfortunately, Phoebe English is unable to join us today due to personal reasons. However, I would still like to introduce her and her work, as she'll still be very much part of this event in terms of what we're discussing. Phoebe is a London-based fashion designer who believes there's an urgent need to build an alliance between fashion designers and farmers. And her recent collection builds upon the new systems, networks, and partnerships her design team has been building, including working with Deborah Barker, who is here today from FIBERSHED, Southeast England. Deborah is a natural dyer, plant alchemist, and textile historian. She has pioneered the FIBERSHED movement in the southeast of England and worked closely with the designer Phoebe English on her recent collection, Soil to Soil. Deborah is currently developing a year-long events program in the high-wheeled AONB with a focus on regenerative farming. Katie Allen is a sheep and cattle farmer based in Gloucestershire. Together with her husband, she works with landowners who wish to manage their land in partnership with nature, embracing a regenerative philosophy to build soil health and improving biodiversity. Over the last few years, she has retrained as a knitwear designer, maker, and she represents a new wave of small-scale textile producers and garment makers championing British wool. As the farmer, designer, and garment producer for her knitwear, she has created a one flock collection using the wool from her native breed sheep. Katie recently graduated from Bath Spa University with an MA in fashion and textile design at the start of last year, launching her award-winning Soil to Soil knitwear, grown, spun, and artisan made within Southwest England. Kate Drury is also with us today and has been working in the agricultural industry for the past 30 years. Kate divides her time between the family farm on the Northamptonshire-Leicestershire border and consultancy work in West Yorkshire. The farm consists of mixed livestock, arable, B&B, commercial, and private lets. She has just gained her master's in sustainable food and agriculture policy at the RAU and is about to commence a PhD in sustainable wool research. She's at present the only British wool female producer board member. I'd like to say that again. She's at the present the only British wool female producer board member. And it's an exciting time when we see a resurgence in this love of wool. And Katherine Chong, who's the co-founder and director of Farms to Feed Us, and has very much largely curated this event today. She is an ecology, social governance, ESG advisor and co-founder of Farms to Feed Us. Katherine advises companies, institutional investors and governments on linking corporate decisions to sociological impacts, including climate-related risks. Her experience includes developing national and global sustainability accounting and reporting standards for a number of industries, including fashion. And she's my partner in crime. And I'm Katherine St. Germans, co-founder of Farms to Feed Us. With Katherine, I organised the Port Eliot Festival for 13 years and more recently the Regenerative Agriculture Gatherings. So that's our panel. What an honour it is to be sitting here with them all. And I have to say, over the last few weeks while we've been working on this event, it's been an incredible experience to spend time with these women. So I'm looking forward to this next hour with you all. So our first question, and it's to all the panel in turn, please can you share from your perspective, what is regenerative fashion? And what should and could regenerative fashion encompass? And can we start with you, Deborah, please? Hi.
Yep, okay, I'm muted, yeah. Equally thrilling to be here and just really exciting to see this issue flagged up at the Oxford Royal Farming Conference too. So I'd love to be able to share a definition of regenerative fashion, but we're really, as you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, and to explore what a regenerative journey of a garment might look like, from design conception, growing of the fibres, making, wearing, repairing, upcycling, and returning the garment to the soil at the end of its useful life. And I'm particularly wary of large corporations claiming to be producing regenerative fashion. We have two people that I know of who can make that claim that it's regenerative, and one of them is here. Katie from Loopy Use and Phoebe English, who I've been working with. But we're all still on a steep learning curve. And it's important, I think, to acknowledge as well that there's no agreed definition of regenerative agriculture within agriculture itself. And this isn't problematic because we need multiple narratives, I think, to engage with the complexity of the natural world. But when the word regenerative is used in fashion, it's generally focused solely on soil health and carbon sequestration, and not in the wider context and meaning of the word. And most of the big corporations claiming to be producing regenerative clothing or fashion have appalling records on worker conditions and pay and environmental degradation. And I believe really strongly that we have a fantastic opportunity to create a paradigm shift in the way that we define regenerative in relation to fashion, and to take the definition beyond how we grow and produce fibres, beyond soil health and carbon sequestration, to ensure that every aspect of the process of creating a garment is fair and equitable and regenerative for everyone involved in that process. And it's really an opportunity to disrupt the colonial extractive supply model and the supply chains which enable the fast fashion industry to thrive, and instead to create supply networks and to create networks where people are equal partners. And that was very much the approach that Phoebe took when she came to us, that the farmers, myself, as I did the natural dyeing and grew the dye plants, the people who were making the pattern cutting, everybody involved was connected, was acknowledged, and had a stake in the process, and was acknowledged for that stake that they had. And the basis of the project that I did with Phoebe was doing what I think we need to do with regenerative fashion, which is to begin to consider how we can work with the resources within our region and stop exploiting the resources from the global south on which our current fashion system depends. I think, as well as thinking about the resources, we need a paradigm shift in terms of how we think about the word fashion, so we can live more equitably and regeneratively within planetary boundaries. And this means reimagining our relationship with clothing, how we relate to our clothes and the materials they are produced from. And it calls for a radical and visionary approach that emphasizes our actual relationship with the garments themselves and the landscape and the people that created it. And rather than investing in trends and fashion, we need to invest in and focus on wearing and celebrating our own personal style. And finally, I'd just like to share a slide from the FIBERSHED movement. So this is share. Can you see that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So this takes its inspiration from Indigenous communities around the world whose clothing returns to the soil at the end of its useful life and leaves no toxic residue, no plastic buttons, no polyester thread. All the materials are broken down at the end of their useful life to nourish the soil. And for me, that process within the context of this wider social and environmental justice is the potential for regenerative fashion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Deborah. Casey, would you like to answer the question next, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to share sort of my journey, I guess, along trying to find my own route to regenerative fashion and what I feel that sort of led me to believe that it should or could encompass. Firstly, most importantly, regenerative fashion system needs to begin and end with healthy soil, by using raw materials that are grown or farmed in a way which encourages soil health, to ensuring garments can return to the earth at the end of their life, not just without doing harm, but with qualities that actually will allow them to enrich the soil microbiome. Natural fibres, only by using materials that nature both provides and then happily reclaims, can fashion contribute to the regeneration of our ecosystems? I think it's really important to mention in stark contrast, synthetic fibres such as acrylic, polyester and nylon don't belong in a regenerative fashion model, not only because they're made from non-renewable fossil fuels, but they release damaging microfibers into our environment throughout their lifetime. Farming with a regenerative philosophy, I mean, faced with the huge biodiversity crisis that we have, it doesn't really feel good enough anymore to just make the choice for natural fibres. I think it's really important to look at how those fibres have been grown. Every part of a regenerative fashion system needs to consider its impact on the environment and what role it can play in giving back more than it takes. And this begins right at the farm level. It needs to be a community-based model, I think, from my vet to my shearer and his wife who handles my wool clip, to the mill that processes my fleeces into yarn, and the printer that produces my tags, and the retail partners who help me sell my garments. There's a whole network of people and businesses who are a vital part of my supply chain, and I work directly with every one of them. Local and regional processing. I think it's important to build a local textile economy so we can create a more visible supply chain with stronger accountability, better resilience, and more opportunity to really connect people to the production of their clothing made without chemicals. From the farming system to the methods of processing fibres to dyes and finishing, there are many stages where harsh toxic chemicals can be removed from the fashion system to reduce impact on the environment. And valuing skills, you know, valuing the skills of garment makers. There's often a big disconnect between those who make our clothes and those who wear them. Unethical brands brush human rights abuses under the carpet, and wages in the garment industry are notoriously low. Most workers are not able to meet basic needs. Even close to home, wages as low as £2 to £3 per hour are allegedly commonplace in Leicester factories supplying fast fashion brands like Boohoo and other online retailers. It's really not possible for a fashion system to be regenerative within a community if it's not valuing the garment maker's contribution to each piece that's been made and sold. And I think we see this same lack of value in the price that farmers are paid for the raw materials they grow. And I think a regenerative fashion system needs to be circular. My Southwest England FIBERSHED collection demonstrates it is possible to bring a level of biodegradability to clothing that the environment can benefit from. You know, I really wanted garments that would last a lifetime, but not forever. Through my work, I've strived to make clothing that's sort of so free from nasty fibres and from chemicals that you can put it on your compost heap at the end of its life, and the decomposition will release nutrients back into the soil. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Katherine.
Well, first of all, thank you, my pharmaceutists, partner in crime, Kathy St. Jones. And thank you, everyone on the panel. I'm utterly grateful and proud that we're here today to discuss meaningfully a term that, if we're not careful, it could be used to perpetuate the perverse practices in the fashion supply-demand chains. There are indeed increasing individuals and collective aspirations among not just farming and the fashion-producing communities, but consumers and particularly marketers to capitalize on the term. We've seen how brands use the term ethical, conscious, sustainable, mindful, purposeful to greenwash. And so we could well see that happen through regenerative fashion. So from my perspective, regenerative fashion at its core has to explore not just that ecological gains, but also the systemic, social, and economic injustices in the whole fashion supply and demand chain, from farms to landfills. And I say exploration as it needs to be a continuous discourse so that we can understand and value every stakeholder's realities as part of the system. No one and no ecosystem is treated as a means to an end. So in principle, Everyone shares the risks and rewards, and everyone plays a part in regenerating the value chain. It shouldn't be defined by any institutions or institutional forces. It should be a collective movement where everyone has a voice. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Katherine. And Kate Drury.
Hi, thank you, Katherine. It's great to be here and great that British Wool have been invited to the conference as it underpins the wool market here in the UK. I'm just going to say a few bits about wool as a regenerative product itself. As many of us will know, it's 100% natural, biodegradable, renewable, has good memory, so wrinkle resistant, naturally breathable, trans-seasonal, odor resistant, stain resistant, fire resistant, recyclable, and is part of carbon sequestration on the animal. So is a regenerative product. It has a lot to offer. However, here in the UK, one of our national flocks value is its versatility. In the UK, we have more than 60 different breeds of sheep, and under British Wool, we grade the wool into 120 different grades under 6 main types. So that's fine, medium, cross, Luster Hill, and mountain. And we have the infrastructure that means that 80% of the UK producers are within an hour of a collection point. If I can just share my screen to show you. So I thought it was important that we demonstrated where at the moment our wool goes to in the UK. So as you can see, 55% of it goes into carpets. But indicatively is that all our breeds and wool types have a purpose. So in the carpets, we've got...
Right, I think we've just lost Kate temporarily there. So I suggest that we move on to the next question. It's question number 2, and hope that Kate can rejoin us. So Katherine, I'd like to present this question to you first of all before you take it to the group. Katherine, what do you think are the main challenges to see a system level adoption of regenerative fashion?
Thank you for the question.
Thanks.
As a climate as well as social ecological economist, I'm particularly interested in weaker problems. So fashion clothes us, gives us joy. As a system, it is one of the top exploiters of natural resources, toxic chemical polluters, greenhouse gas emitters, and particularly in the last decade, produce more clothes and other fashion items based on fossil fuel derived fibers, all of the different polys, more than humanity ever need. So where there are use of plant and animal fibers, it is largely supporting industrial farming. So for today, I'd like to focus on key governance issues. So we do have limited time here. So while regenerative farming offers a lot of opportunities for the fashion industry as a whole, there are systemic dysfunctionalities within the fashion system that would require a lot of collective will and power to enable regenerative fashion. So what are the issues? In the global context, we're looking at a system that largely de-engages with farming. It is a one-directional relationship where decision makers see nature as an infinite resource and farming as just another input they're entitled to, rather than partners to respect and learn from. So fibers are just costs. So they only care if it's available as cheaply as possible and as invariable as possible. Hence, the highly globalized fashion system not only damages the ecosystem, but also ignores the very important, the true cost of farming, ecological variability, such as weather conditions, topography, soil fertility, water access, quality, biological variability, such as diseases, and more that farmers face. So in the UK context, I apologize, there's another important dimension to deep into. We're looking at fiber economy, class as rural economy. It's trivialized socially and economically. So the result is a decline, and to a great extent, the loss of networks of processing capabilities backed by hundreds of years of knowledge in making textiles from wool, flax, and hemp. So Deborah, Katie, and Phoebe, I mean, you all work with wool and other plant fibers like flax and hemp as well. Could you share your thoughts from your perspective, experience on the key challenges as well as the enablers to building a meaningful alliances between farmers, fiber and textile producers, and designers?
Great, thanks, Katherine. Yes, so I think if everyone can join here, and I think Kate, we have you back. So please join for this question too, and then we'll try to make time to come back to your presentation at the end of this next question. So Deborah, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I was just going to concur with what Katherine was saying previously, that you know, we've lost the capacity to process both linen and linen and hemp, as our textile industry was offshored. The sort of manufacturing disappeared, and we've lost the skills and the machinery, and that's actually a really big issue, particularly even with wool, where we're very blessed that we have a good wool supply, and we do have big spinning mills, weaving, squaring mills in the northwest. There's still an issue with people who want to process smaller amounts of wool. So for a lot of farmers, particularly farmers who are interested in farming regeneratively, they want to keep the provenance of their wool and know that the wool that they send is the wool that they get back as yarn. And with a lot of the bigger mills, that's not possible because the volumes they require through their machinery have to collate the wool together. So I think, I know that the Wool Board are working on provenance, and they can now sort of identify wool from a particular area. But yeah, certainly for smaller farmers who want to keep that identity and who sort of, for whom it's important, the processing is an issue. And if you've got flax or hemp, you have to send it to Italy. So that is a big barrier.
Thanks, Deborah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
Katie.
I mean, I haven't found a problem with processing small quantities of wool. I know that there's obviously we've got the Natural Fibre Company in the southwest who spin all my yarns, and you know, when I started, I saved up about 2 years fleeces. It was about 25 kilos, and then the biggest amount I've put through them is 180 kilos 1 year. So that's quite a, you know, that's quite 25 kilos is a relatively small amount in commercial scales, but 180 kilos is still small commercially, but it's still quite a sizable amount for a small traceable project. And there's a new mill just opened up, the Ramsham Hill mill in Dorset. There's the Two Rivers mill in Dorset. There's up on the borders, there's a small mill that will process as little as 1 fleece. So I think there are routes for farmers that want to process, or textile designers or makers that want to process small batches. They obviously don't have the same economies of scale as the big mills. I mean, one of the challenges, and flax and hemp, as Deborah said, is, you know, we don't have any facilities like that at all in the UK. I know that Flaxlands UK in the Stroud area do process very, very small quantities, and there's been an amazing project run by the Northwest FIBERSHED, have been doing an amazing project with growing their own denim. So there are these incredible grassroots projects happening all over the country, but taking it to that next level to scale it up so people can really grab it as a solution is definitely going to require some investment into some big processing facilities. I think my biggest challenge that I've faced is I've always found the farming industry really welcoming, and I've always found the same thing with the maker community as well, which is where my work is sort of often sits or is classed as like craft. But my experience of the fashion industry has been really different. Despite the fact that I'm a qualified fashion designer, I often feel I'm having to skirt around the outside of it, and sometimes I feel like I'm hitting my head against a brick wall. It seems to orientate around who you know. And I often see conversations around fashion sustainability that are talking about biodiversity issues, but never involve a farmer. So it feels like there's this wall up between us, and it's something that I'm not sure how to break down.
Yeah, it's just utterly upsetting, as you said. Kathy, a lot of the mainstream conversation or the main discourses exclude farmer, as if farmers is not the enabler of fashion. You just wonder, Deborah, in your work with FIBERSHED, and Kate, your work with British Wool, are you seeing that increasing appetite or interest to want to engage with the farming community and learn?
Yeah, there's a huge interest. I mean, I probably get an email a week from designers who want to work with regenerative wool. But I think because they're not, a lot of them aren't approaching it, unlike Phoebe, who I'd say approached it in absolutely the right way, in that she came to learn. A lot of them want something off the shelf, and they're not really prepared to spend the time looking at what it might mean, finding a farmer, partnering, and taking into account that wider kind of regenerative culture. And actually, were you saying, Katie, that you had to wait, you collected your wool for 2 years? Although absolutely the small mills are there, and I think you're particularly well serviced down in the west of the country, whereas and in the northwest, where the Northwest FIBERSHED is based. In the southeast, we just have one mill, and there is a long waiting list. And I think if you want to process organic, it's they're only doing a run every 2 years. So when people come to me and they say, we want this regenerative wool, they want something really quickly. So one of the shifts we have to make is, at the same time as shifting the paradigm slightly, so that people understand they're working with farming seasons and processing time, and a wool clip takes time to develop. If you want something specific, we do need to kind of speed up the process for the smaller mill, or do need more small mills, so that we can get those smaller volumes through. Because otherwise, I think we're always going to have this mismatch between people who want to do the work and people who need it sooner than is possible. And at the moment,
Deborah, do you think as well, though, there's a real issue within the fashion system of fast and speed?
Absolutely.
And actually part of the change that fashion needs to make is to be aware of the fact that things don't happen quickly, and everybody does need to slow down, and things do take time, and they can't just get their wool really quickly, because it's about season, and it is about using a small artisan mill, and there is going to be a waiting list, and that it's the long game, and it's about less is more.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. But I think there's a difference between recognizing you have to work with a farming year, and my kind of dream FIBERSHED project would be to take a designer to meet a farmer, and they would say, well, I really love that yarn you produced that year and that color. Could you is there a way of combining these fleeces? And the farmer can say, well, actually, when in fact I know it's happened at Plaw Hatch, where my daughter, who's a shepherd there, wanted a particular color of yarn, so she brought in a Jacob and mixed it. And I'm sure you've done the same as well, Katie, where you're looking at how you can breed to create the kind of fineness, the low micron count that will give you the nice soft wool, if that's what you're wanting for knitting or for garments, as well as the color. So my dream would be to kind of work with the designer and the farmer, and then you're working with the farming season. And I think there is a rationale to that, but I'm not sure there's a rationale to being underserviced in terms of processing, so that people then have to wait a couple of years to get that fleece then through a mill. So I absolutely agree that we need to slow down, and there needs to be a whole shift in the way we value materials. And I loved your phrase, designing garments for life but not forever. I think
I love that as well.
Perfectly.
Just to bring Phoebe in here for a moment, if I may, Deborah, and I think it's something that we've talked about, and that Phoebe has talked about with us, is that when she was doing her project, that she realised that they were trying to work during the lambing season.
Yes.
Which for her as a fashion designer had never been an issue before. And it kind of underlined the fact that fashion industry has become so completely divorced from nature.
Yeah.
And that there is one end of the fashion world there's a designer, at the other end is the farmer, and they're now having to learn to start to speak the same language.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we had to sorry.
No, please. Oh, please. I apologize. I was wondering if Kate has returned and
Yes.
she's able to. Oh,
Yeah,
yay!
she's here.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Kate, can we let's see you, Kate. Let's make
Well,
sure
yeah.
you're there.
I'm trying, but my host
Okay.
doesn't seem to want to see my face. But we've had a power cut, I'm actually not going to move or breathe or do anything, and so hopefully that I can join in. But just of what I've sort of been able to glean so far is that I absolutely think there is a real interest from the consumer to know what they're buying, to know where it's come from and how it's been made. And I think, you know, I saw that last year now at Yarndale, where a lot of the people were saying that all day they were just being asked, okay, where's this yarn come from? I want to know about it, I want to know what it's made of. And I think that's one thing that we've done quite well at British Wool with our e-commerce site, is that we can authenticate the products and the licensees and the whole supply chain to ensure that that wool has come off British farms. It's been very successful, and I think it's been, you know, a long time needed. But if we can create an opportunity where consumers more and more can buy what they're asking for, then it will help all of us.
Amazing. I mean, I quite like to go back to what Deborah said earlier, and then that's really an interesting point, that building that alliance and working with farmers. It's you know, and I sort of focus a lot about what's the sort of sharing of the recent work with farmers, but actually, as Deborah have interestingly said, even the farming system, even farmers would find that symbiotic relationship quite rewarding. So farmers have the chance to learn, and perhaps if they didn't have a chance before, or responding to the various market forces or what actually designers want. And so I really appreciate that point, Deborah.
I think also it'd be really good for farmers to see where their wool was going. I think at the moment it's something that's obviously, you know, they see their flock producing it every year. They have to take care of it. They, you know, it's quite a big deal, shearing. And then it goes off, and you know they're not covering their costs on it. So at the moment it's only a financial burden, and then they're not even getting the sort of reward of seeing that it's actually being used for something really really beautiful. You know, I mean that there's a fashion brand, Peregrine, who uses British wool jumpers, who have a outlet in Selfridges, a new outlet in Selfridges. And I just think, imagine how those farmers would feel if they knew that there was that those jumpers hanging on that rail in Selfridges came off the back of their sheep. For those specific farmers, it would be incredibly rewarding. And I think if they could feel that there was a demand for their wool, that it was valued, and that if it was produced in a variety of different ways to suit a variety of different markets, that they would be interested in experimenting, going down those routes.
I think that's an interesting point, Katie. And I think there's been kind of quite a lot of focus on consumers being able to follow their sheep with some brands and with sweaters and so on. But I think that looking at it from the farmer's point of view is something that is part of this change that needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's where projects like the one we were able to do this year with funding from FIBERSHED in the USA are really helpful. They funded us to run 3 micro projects looking at growing commercial dye crops. And as part of that, I was able to run on-farm events with farmers and bring designers down from London, and young fashion designers and students, in fact, postgrad students. And it was amazing to see how much dialogue there was and how enthusiastic they were at meeting the farmers as much as the designers, and how much understanding can be gained from a visit to a farm and actually experiencing the materials firsthand. And I think the biggest shock for the designers that I brought up to both to Plorhatch and to another farm that's in Kent was how complex and how complicated agriculture is, and how complex it is actually maintaining the ecology of a space. And it was really helping them to understand the nuances of regenerative farming, that, as we were saying yesterday, Katie, it's based on context. It's not just a simple set of practices that can be imposed on an environment. It's actually working with the environment, with the community, with the people, with their resources. And I think we need more of that.
Well, I'm just seeing in the chat, thank you, Rosedale, offering to invite fashion designers to your farm in Buckinghamshire. Thank you. I think more farm visits is absolutely what the fashion world needs, and we're very much aware of young fashion designers who are part of this grassroots movement. So thank you for that, Rose. Yes,
if I would make a last point, or rather reinforce a point about invariability, is that this connection with farming in the same way that it translates in our attitude towards food as well. That obsession that things have to look alike, things have to be standard, and not appreciating that variability is beautiful and variability is nature. And until unless we do that, to a large extent, we struggle to see how regenerative or fashion could be regenerative in a truer sense. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think this could just to kind of reference here quickly for a moment to the audience, that it's obviously we've decided to focus largely on wool today, as obviously leather is part of this story, hemp and flax, and the work that Alice Robinson and Sarah Grady are doing within the leather world is a really powerful traceability project, which has got far-reaching potential, and it's amazing what they're doing. Back to you, Katherine.
We've actually got some leather in that, going through that of interest.
I heard.
Just to bring that, yeah. So
I heard. I was talking.
We're talking to Katie Warrener, who is going to hopefully make some products from us. So yes, I mean, it's amazing to be on that journey with them.
Yes, I was speaking to Katie this morning, and hi, Grady Robinson. It's good to see you here, Sarah and Alice. Yeah, it's very, very exciting. For anyone who doesn't know what is happening within this group of women, it's kind of amazing, and I wasn't quite sure how much I could say right now. And hi to you, Katie Warrener, at home in Devon. And I'd also just like to mention the Connick Estate, where the Regen Ag Gathering took place 2 years ago, where Sarah and Alison, I believe, first met, and it's where Phoebe first came and kind of entered this farming sphere. So the women at the Connick Estate, thank you for your role in this nascent movement as well. Katherine, are we now on to our next question, do you think? Looking at the time here. We're actually perfectly on time for 4:41 for question 3. Okay, I'm going to go to you now, Katherine, to kick this one off as well. Katherine, what are the key market forces that could stimulate and support regenerative farming? Okay, you've got 2 minutes. Go.
Yes, I might actually go a little bit over 2 minutes this time, because I really want to nail some of the opportunities as well, challenges in the market forces that we are seeing. So there are many components and stakeholders in the fashion value chain that need support. So I will focus on the most marginalized stakeholders in the fashion system. The laborers and many communities in developing countries are hugely marginalized, but as Kathy only sent me 2 minutes, I might get a little more than 2 minutes. I'll focus on the support for the farming communities. So firstly, there is increasing political and economic interest in net zero among governments and corporations. So one of the expression of that growing interest is the financing for carbon sequestration, which I welcome, but are anxious about the prevalent mechanism where there's this presumption that we can simply offset greenhouse gas emissions, and that the impacts to climate and people will simply disappear if you just offset it. Now, that is not how carbon cycle works. It's in fact not how any ecosystem works. It is a dynamic system which interact with other cycles, other geochemical cycles, other ecosystem functions and society. So over the last 2 decades, we saw some carbon offsetting programs, huge ones that's cross-regional and global, that inevitably damage ecosystem and encourages land grabbing and displacement of indigenous communities, just under the tagline of carbon offsetting. And then secondly, it is the financing for ecosystem services via farmers, recognizing that farmers are the crucial custodian of many ecosystems, particularly the nexus of soil, water, and air to plant and animal biodiversity. So it's to the ecosystem resilience to climate change. And in the UK, both interests have translated into a very early stage of the new environmental land management scheme NEMS, which is in principle should mean subsidies to transitioning into regenerative agriculture, but we're still waiting to see more details. In the EU, quite excitingly, there is an EU strategy for sustainable textile that should be introduced this year. And there are also a number of private sectors which we'd like to explore in another session if you join all of us again in the future, in our future events. Lastly, consumer is also a great market force, like what KKTF said earlier. They are a great market force for systemic change. Whilst I worry about greenwashing, as I said earlier, I do believe that if we as a movement continue to pursue a participatory discourse for regenerative agriculture and regenerative products, we ought to see more people wanting to be a part of that value chain, not just as a soulless, mindless consumer, but one that plays a part in that positive change. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Katherine. Yeah, and I think that picks up on Rebecca Burgess's point as well from FIBERSHED, where she talks about how now as consumers, we ought to maybe start thinking about our clothes as heirlooms. Okay, Deborah, next question is to you, please. To what extent do the challenges faced by the FIBERSHED movement in the Southeast reflect the ones faced by the whole of the British Isles?
Yeah, so I know that Justine is there. I noticed from the Northwest FIBERSHED is in the chat, and certainly my conversations with her and with Emma, who is in the Southwest FIBERSHED, who are the two other established FIBERSHEDs in the UK, the challenges are shared equally. And there are a growing number of FIBERSHEDs, I might say, for people who are interested. There's one just been established in York, another in Northumberland, a Welsh FIBERSHED, and a FIBERSHED. They may not be on the map yet, but they're coming. And as a global grassroots network, I also share conversations not just with other FIBERSHED people in the UK, but also globally. And I'd say that the challenges are global challenges, and they are this lack of infrastructure for manufacturing and processing at regional scale. We have as national scale processing, but on regional scale, particularly around hemp and linen, the knowledge has been lost, the machinery has been dismantled and lost, the skills have been lost. And also even for wool on that smaller scale. There's also dye plants. I think I mentioned earlier, the dye plant project I was involved in with funding from the FIBERSHED in the USA. And if we want regionally regeneratively produced textiles and clothing, then there's obviously self-coloured wool and self-coloured linen, but there's also the possibility of amazing rainbow of colours with plants and fungus. And we do need growers growing dye plants on a commercial scale. There are a few people around who are growing privately for their own use in small batch production. But if you wanted to buy some as a designer or a natural dyer on the open market, there are no commercial dyers. So if there are any farmers on this call who are interested, we're keen to take forward the next stage of our project, working with farmers to upscale natural dyeing. And again, there's a lack of processing and harvesting equipment, but we do have some funding from South East England FIBERSHED to work on that. So we're very excited to see where that takes us.
Thanks, Deborah. And just to say, I think this event, we very much wanted that kind of call out from Deborah on the opportunities for farmers to diversify, and growers as well within this sphere. There's many opportunities, which Deborah is very much at the heart of, particularly with her project that she's doing right now.
Sorry, Kathy, it's just a chance to flag up Phoebe's project. I think it's helpful to say at this point that the project that Southeast FIBERSHED partnered with Phoebe English to create regenerative fashion, to see how far we could take the process. It really, as a project, is a brilliant example of all the challenges at all the different levels, from sourcing fibres to sourcing dye stuffs, to working in ways to, how to get that garment back into the compost at the end of its life. So if anybody is able to access that, I'm not quite sure whether the studio make that public or not, but there was a marvelous exhibition at the British Library called Here Another Way, where she explored the regenerative process of trying to create a regenerative collection.
Well, I think we're hope that we'll be able to bring Phoebe into another event very soon, so that she can tell more of us about that. I think there's also opportunities. I mean, one of the things that has struck me in the conversation I had with Katie Warrener, who's part of Southwest England FIBERSHED, is there's no British produced thread. I mean, that's something that only recently occurred to me as well. I mean, it's like even the thread that we use, none of it is made in Britain. I think there's a couple of farms that are looking at producing thread, but I mean, again, that's another issue that is such an important part of this discussion for leather workers as well as cloth makers. Okay, Kate, can we go to you now, please? Tell us how British wool is supporting the wool industry in the UK. Are there opportunities for improvement, specifically in playing a bigger part in the regenerative farming movement?
Yeah, thank you. So British wool ensures that all wool has a route to market, which is something that we mustn't underestimate. Ensuring farmers get the best price achievable, because we do this by collective marketing through a global online auction. Our grading and core testing ensures a sustainable supply with consistent quality into the supply chain. And this sort of goes back to the conversation that I half came in on about processing, and then we ensure that we maintain our 2 scouring plants in the UK, and that we maintain our supply chain. This enables the development of niche marketing, having this data and this quality. And then the traceability helps product branding, which allows brands to grow and then to work at scale, which they need to do. British Wool also trains the next generation of shearers to ensure we maintain high animal welfare standards. In terms of opportunities going forward, by supporting the sector to realise a value for its wool, we will be playing an important part in the transition to more sustainable regenerative agriculture. As mentioned, the traceability scheme, it was trialled last year and is going ahead this year, Back to the Farm will play a key part. We're looking to build on this, and we're achieving this by working in conjunction with wool processors and the manufacturers to add more value for our members, because, as you know, is pointed out, that we need the value of the raw material to increase if we can do more with it. Specifically to regenerative, and this feeds back to Katherine Chong's point, without a clearly defined auditing scheme that is adhered to by all the supply chain, it'll be difficult to achieve an economic increase. However, we can all work together to increase an awareness of regenerative farming. If a scheme doesn't have scale such that we're able to make commercial size lots from audited farms, then processors and manufacturers just won't pay a premium for our wool. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Katie, final question in this section to you. From your perspective, what do you feel is the importance of fashion designers working more closely with the people growing and processing their raw materials?
I think So from my experience, I think farmers are overlooked in their role as fibre growers. I think there's as we've talked about, there's a disconnect from the reality that our clothes come from farming. I believe that over the last 10 or 15 years, people have become a lot more invested in how their food is produced. They've been more engaged with farming stories and making choices about the type of food systems they want to see. And I do think there are signs that this mindset is shifting to fashion. I often find customers and the public sort of wanting to talk to me about the price of British wool and the issues surrounding plastic microfiber pollution. I think fashion needs to get on board with this and embrace this change in consumer interest. As Deborah has pointed out, there is an appetite for it, but I think there's also a vast appetite that's not interested, which is where our biggest challenge lies. For me, design is about breaking down barriers and moving boundaries to find better or new approaches. So I think it's all our responsibility to bring about change. But designers in particular not only have the skills to do this, but they're at the right point in the supply chain to lead this change in the fashion system. I'd like to see more engagement directly with farmers from the fashion industry, and from fashion education in particular. I do see a lot of commentary from fashion education, like I said, about nature and about wildlife and about biodiversity, but there are never farmers giving input on those courses, or there are never farmers on those discussion panels. It's always other sort of academics that they involve, like anthropologists and things like that. I think if fashion businesses want to have a positive impact on nature, they need to be connecting with the people at the beginning of their supply chain who are immersed in that natural environment and the systems which produce their raw materials. And really, to me, it all comes back to that model of regenerative fashion. It starts and ends with the soil. Fashion designers need to be starting and ending their design process with consideration to the soil. And most importantly, listening to those who spend their time caring for it.
Thanks, Katie. Great. We've got 5 minutes left now. And I think actually I'd just like to continue with you here, just on the question about personal advice to the audience in terms of how we can all contribute to the regenerative fashion movement, bearing in mind that we have a wide range of interests here from farming to consumption. Is there anything else you'd like to add before moving on to Katherine?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all consumers. We all wear clothes. So we all have the power to make change and ask questions. And I think we need to all buy less and we need to make it last. And I think when we do buy, we need to support a business that can tell you how your garment was made. When you're making the decision to buy a garment that's made using natural fibres, we should be asking the farm that's supplying the wool, how they work in partnership with nature, ask what they're doing to regenerate their soil health, and ask questions about how the farm protects and encourages biodiversity. If the brand can't answer those questions, move on to the next one.
I kind of want to put my arm in the air right now. Great answer. Thank you, Katherine. Can you unmute, Katherine?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, we've got 4 minutes, everybody.
So I'll implore everyone to join the discourse. Don't think that your perspective is insignificant. The regenerative fashion movement will only be stronger and more meaningful if it represents diversity in culture, in experience, in interest, and in knowledge. That means that every one of us here will have to see themselves as a part of the value chain. The farmers, the processors, the designers, the retailers, the shoppers, the communities, the politicians, sorry, and so on. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Katherine. Deborah, what quick minute on?
Yeah, I would just say
personal advice.
Yeah, I would say that if you're making a new purchase, to think whether it can return to the earth and nourish the earth, or is it returning as a poison? That would be.
That's wonderful, thank you. And Kate.
I think it goes back to two things, isn't it? It's like as consumers is to ask, be interested in where that product's come from, and its journey, but also very much so we have to reconnect the consumer with every part of the supply chain, because there are many artisans and professionals that work in getting that wool right from lambing time right through to a final garment. And I think if we can be a lot more in touch and understand all those people that care and have made the project, then it will make a difference to consumers' choice.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kate. Our final question, I think actually people could add it into the chat box if they, in the audience, for the panel, is to say, we at Farms for Feeders will be staging more conversations on regenerative farming and fashion, and what issues would you like us to cover? So anything that you feel that we haven't covered today, please can you add it into the chat, and also you could join our after party as well. In terms of questions from the audience, we've got 2 minutes left now. There's questions, Gwen, Henry, that Della. Again, if you could put that in the chat if you haven't already. What if you live in the UK but cannot wear wool against your skin, says Sean. Deborah, how would you answer that? Or maybe that would be a good one for Kate Drury.
Yeah, sorry, can you just repeat that last question? I just heard.
What if you live in the UK but cannot wear wool against the skin? And I know that there's processes are taking place for the processing of wool to find softer versions of it and so on. Is that something you can say about from the Wool Board?
Yeah, I mean, I took his question to mean that that maybe he was allergic, it created a reaction. So I mean, I think there are a lot of sustainable fibres on there, and so yeah. That's how I read his question.
Look for an alternative.
An alternative.
Yeah, exactly. Fast fashion part of the problem, I think we've covered that. It most certainly is. So we've now come to 5 o'clock.
Yes. I'm sorry, we have to leave because the next session's anxious to start.
Exactly.
But if people would like to go into the after party, the after events, then all those questions can be batted around then. Well, thank you. Thank you for all of you for a fascinating, really fascinating sort of range of issues. And the chat's been really interesting too. So good luck and thank you again. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.